So this is a presentation on social media and cognition as part of the Houston Christian University Masters of Psychology for the Psychology of Learning course with Dr. Karen Frederick. So a little bit of history about social media. Um, in 1995 is when the first generation was born, called the iGen, that they experienced internet their entire life. They don't remember a time before the internet. And they also were the first generation that really grew up with cell phones. Cell phones existed, but they didn't exist in smartphone form until the invention of the iPhone in 2007. And then the generation who had access to the internet in the palm of their hands increased even after that in 2010 with the first iPad, where suddenly it wasn't just people who had access to a cell phone, but people who had access suddenly to these tablets that had access to the internet and had access to social media. So social media comes in a lot of different forms. And it started with MySpace in 2005, and then Facebook came shortly after in 2006. In 2007, we got YouTube, and then in 2008, Twitter came along. There are also MySpace is kind of a defunct one, so that's why it's not mentioned. It's not here on the board. And then we also have things like Tumblr. Instagram came around in 2010. Snapchat came in 2013. Discord came in 2014. And then even later on, we have TikTok in 2022. And in 2023, we have Threads. And so, really, social media is constantly evolving and constantly turning into something new for people to consume, or creating these new platforms for people to consume media on. The original design of like MySpace and Facebook were to utilize the internet in a way that connected people together. Originally, it was something that they were connected just with a shared interest of, oh, we went to the same school together. And so that's how it began. And then with things like Reddit, where it's a platform that people are able to post like discussion boards, and other users are able to contribute to that. And then YouTube, where there are videos that are created and then shared with the world. So this is a beautiful tool that allows us to be able to communicate um, not just locally, but globally, and be part of a global conversation. And so there are really benefits to social media, and there are also detriments. So some of the benefits of social media, one of the biggest ones is education, where suddenly we have access to so much information. And part of that information includes shared experiences. With social media, we see people who are openly talking about their mood disorders or their personality disorders or trauma that has happened to them. And it makes everyone feel so much less alone when you see that, oh, I'm not unique in this really hard experience that happened to me. Um, and social media also allows for ease of communication, where suddenly you don't have to know everyone's name, number, address to invite them to a party, but you can just send them a Facebook invite. Or when you're trying to get together with a study group, you can say, "Oh, let's go on group me, and we can have a group chat about this, or we can Zoom together." And there's so much access to other people's time, and it's a lot easier to communicate. And with that ease of communication also leads to access of to communities of like-minded individuals. Whereas before, I think we were very limited to people who were just in our area, who we could who we had access to, and suddenly we have access to the entire world, which means that if you have a really niche interest like collecting antique dolls or something, there's an entire community on Facebook dedicated to just that. And so there's no unique experience, which is a benefit to a lot of people because suddenly they don't feel alone. There are obviously detriments to social media as well. One of the biggest detriments that we see are the mood disorders. Time spent on social media is directly correlated with mood disorders like depression and anxiety. And a big part of that comes from a comparative aspect of social media where people are presenting their best selves on social media. And um, it's not an accurate depiction of who they are, but our brain looks at that and goes, oh, this is who they are, even though the portion of us that we are sharing on social media is not all of us. It's just this facade. It's a portion of who we are. It's who we want to show. Um, Another detriment is that there is less in-person socialization. There really is a benefit to seeing someone's body language, to seeing what someone else is how someone else is acting and not just the words that they're typing on a screen, or even just watching a video. There's a lot of like parasocial relationships and things that have formed because um, people are feeling connected through social media without actually experiencing in-person connection and intimacy. Another huge detriment to social media is the spread of misinformation. And we really saw this in 2020 when COVID began. And suddenly, so many different sources were saying all of these different things about how to protect ourselves, what the spread of disease looked like. And we had very little fact checking. It was up to the individual user to do their research. And most people are going to pick the path of least resistance, which was just listening to someone who they knew or respected and expecting that they were telling the truth without necessarily fact checking what information was being spread. And because social media has just those little tiny buttons you get to click that say, oh, share, like, comment, um, the misinformation was being spread so quickly. And so obviously this class is about cognition. And so we're going to talk about the effects that social media has specifically on cognition. So our text talks about attention, and there's a huge portion of social media that really does affect attention. And we're seeing this where 10 years ago, back when YouTube first started, we could sit and we would watch hour-long videos of someone talking. And now TikTok exists where people can barely watch a 15-second clip. And so the amount of attention that we are able to pay to all of these different all of this different content that exists really has to do with the fact that there is so much content that our brain has to pick something, and it's going to attend to the thing that is most salient, that's most bright and shiny and interesting, that sparks our brain. And so we don't necessarily get to sometimes we get to consciously filter it, so we get to pick what sites we're using, or we can even put filters on those sites to specifically show us content that we want to see. But at the same time, our brain is also doing a lot of that culling where it decides, oh, I'm not interested in this, and we just swipe. Language is another part of cognition that is affected by social media because language is now developing at a rapid rate where there are new terms that are coming out, new slang terms, and they are being rapidly integrated into society where something that happened on the internet becomes memeified, becomes a new term, and then it's adopted into real life language. And this is happening in real time immediately, and this adaptation is happening very quickly. Another aspect of cognition that we see with social media is creativity. Not only is it creativity in getting to share people's art together, whether that's a visual media of some kind, like creating a video, or people are learning how to do create new arts together. There's also the creativity aspect of how we access each other. So people who are using search engine optimization, who are really smart and savvy with the way that they use social media, are also using creativity in a really unique way that's accessing our brains. Um, and whether that's good or bad, it's kind of up to you to decide. And then decision making is another big part of cognition that is affected by social media. So we talked a little bit about misinformation. So when we're making decisions, our brain likes to take shortcuts. We just talked about heuristics um, in class, and it's really important to understand that like our brain can't process everything. Our brain can't be going through these long steps of decision making every time, which means that we like to take shortcuts. We um, and social media makes it really easy to take those shortcuts and just start believing whatever is out there on the internet. Having critical thinking skills and making decisions um, that are based in truth becomes a little bit more difficult when so much misinformation exists on the internet. So my personal experience is that I really do think that social media gamifies connections. There's all of these little red notifications of, oh, you have a new message, you have a new like, you have a new comment. Oh, someone you know might be on the internet also. And all of these trigger this dopamine, and it really connects us to social media in a way that can be pretty unhealthy pretty quickly because it's a lot like gambling where there's constant notifications that make it so that we want to go back and continue to want to go back over and over and over again. Um, and social media does have some sketchy practices with algorithms where while we might feel really connected, a lot of the connections that we're experiencing on social media are parasocial connections. They're not really people we know, they're just people who are sharing on the internet that have disclosed enough for us to feel intimate with them, but they don't know we exist. And this is a really new and unique situation that, yeah, we used to have this with celebrities in like a broad sense of tabloids would take pictures and we go, oh, I know that celebrity, but we didn't have that sense of intimacy that we have that social media creates. And so, especially because the algorithm pushes corporations and profit over connections and people, we're seeing social media influencers instead of our friends and family. Um, it does, however, give us a broader sense of community where we're able to find people who have really niche shared interests. I was going through my divorce this year, and I found social media so healing to have other people who have also experienced similar divorces, who are also trying to navigate co-parenting. And suddenly there was access to a community at my fingertips that made me feel not so alone, that helped me to go through that grieving process. Um, there's also an aspect of social currency. So the way that we connect with each other now has changed. Many of my friends, our primary means of communication is sending memes to each other on Instagram or on Facebook. And that is because that has become a new social currency where this is how people are interacting, this is how people are building rapport with each other. So these are the references for the different resources that I used during this presentation. Thank you so much for listening.